Welcome to Conscious Cannabiz. I'm your host, Courtney Aura Freeman. I'm here with Victor Pinho. He's with Emerald Farm Tours, and we'll be talking about events, what's happening with farm tours, a little bit of his background, a little bit of conscious business practices. Victor, welcome to Conscious Cannabiz. Would you please introduce yourself and tell us what brought you to the cannabis industry?
Sure. Thank you, Courtney. My name is Victor Pinho. I've been in the cannabis space for almost 20 years now. It started when I was an undergrad at the University of Maryland, College Park. I started by starting a chapter of NORML on campus and a chapter of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. And that quickly took me, having been in Maryland and so close to Washington, D.C., I started working right away in the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws office on K Street at the time in D.C. And it became like a policy, drug policy love affair. So I started very early on, moving and changing policies in my home states of New Jersey and right after college. And then about 10 years ago, moved to California, continued my, advocacy work, and then eventually ended up getting a full-time job with the Berkeley Patients Group as their marketing communications director, and started taking paychecks from the industry, if you will. It was for a long time advocacy work, and it was work that we were doing to satisfy our souls and, get poor. But but
Wait,
now
educate me. Was Keith Stroop there on the East Coast?
Oh yeah, totally. So it was back when I started. It was Keith, Paul, Allen. My first boss in cannabis was Chris Crane.
Okay, tell us about that.
Oh, that was. I mean, we were all super young. I mean, we all came out of this class of people that were, I mean, I'm probably the first millennial in that group. They're all a little bit older than me. But yeah, so we started, working with Chris Crane. He was the outreach director at NORML at the time. So as an intern, I fell right under him. And then subsequently ended up working with Chris Crane for the rest of Chris Crane's a friend. We're friends today. And, I've worked with him alongside of him at SSDP when he was the executive director there. Followed him through Forefront, and just a lot of love there. So it all stemmed from that DC contingent about 20 years ago. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
And okay, so tell us a little bit about Emerald Farm Tours. How did you get into farm tours?
All right. So after I had spent a substantial bit of time in the last 10 years working cannabis policy and working at BPG, I left BPG and did some consulting. And the consulting wasn't even like the exciting part. Like the exciting part was like learning and learn, what I learned from the consultative gigs, getting people prepared. This was right as we were going into 64 being codified and January 1 of that year that everything came online. It was that fall prior to that. I started working with some different farmers up in Northern California, in Humboldt and Mendocino, getting them, legal, permitted, etc. And one day I'm just talking to my friend Dave Bienenstock, formerly of High Times, also writes for Leafly, and he does a million things, including the marijuana. This Day in History, This Day in Marijuana History podcast. So with Abdullah, so he does a lot of cool stuff. And we were talking at the time. It was I remember the date because it was the day I started the company. It was the first week in December of that year, 3 years ago, and he had asked me to go up to Humboldt and Mendocino to introduce him to some farmers because he was writing a story. So we drove up, we met up there, and at some point on a ride back through Humboldt, he goes, "Man, that was great. You introduced me to all these farmers. Have you ever considered like doing this for a living?" And like, I was somewhere between like the Humboldt Mendo line, and I turned to him and I was just like, "Challenge accepted, Dave." And that was December 5th. That was December 5th of 2017, right? 18, 19, 20. Yeah. No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause
Yeah. Yeah.
all the regs started coming in 2018. That was like a hard
2018. Yeah.
time.
So
Yeah.
it was like the fall right before. So, and so December 5th went home and registered the URL emeraldfarmtours.com. And by February 1st, by the next February 1st, the following February 1st, we were launching our first tours. So the rest is history, and what a hell of a history it's been till today.
Great. That's great. Thanks for that background.